This is it, the most exciting part. Chapter 5, Part 2, the last 20 or so pages of the novel. If I need to do one more video, I might just do it, but I'm not sure yet. But here we go. So, I'm starting on page 172. She says towards the top, I spiraled around one more set of stairs, and then as I came down to the narrow straightway before the next curve, I saw light. I saw the light. No, it's if you see a light at the end of a tunnel, don't go through. She says, I passed the threshold. I descended into the light. A little bit before this, she says something very important. If you want to focus on the power of control, my free will was compromised, if only by the severe temptation of the unknown. So in this case, the uncanny is so powerful. It lures her in. It says, come, you have to figure this out. You have to figure it out. You have to come here and see the crawler. And so, just before she's about to see the crawler, she does a short little change, right, with one of the feathers. Now, this is very important. Unlike before, in her previous adventures, she doesn't really explain at all what she really saw and why it's important. Again, now reading this about a third or fourth time, I realize she may have actually died at this moment, although we're not sure. So one night, during the last months at Rock Bay, I found myself intensely restless. And so she goes out drunk and then goes out to the sea and sees something incredible. And she said on page 173 in the middle, people my entire life have told me I am too much in control. But that has never been the case. I have never truly been in control, have never wanted control. But it's very interesting. In the next paragraph, she says, nothing that might satisfy the organization that had provided the grant. I was the queen of the title pools. Control. And what I said was the law. Control. And what I reported was what I had wanted to report. Control. I had gotten sidetracked like I always did because I melted into my surroundings. Adaptation. Assimilation. So you want to write this down. Adaptation is also about assimilation. Could not remain separate from, apart from, objectivity foreign land to me. Objectivity of foreign land to me, excuse me. So, she loves this title pool above everything else. And then on the next page, at the very bottom of page 174, she sees this enormous, and I'm talking ginormous, rare species of colossal starfish, six-armed, larger than a saucepan, that bled a dark gold color. Many of us professionals eschewed it or called it its scientific name for the more apt destroyer of worlds. What? What do you mean the destroyer of worlds? Thick spines along the edges I could just see, fringed with emerald green, the most delicate of transparent cilia, thousands of them propelling it along as it searched for its prey, other lesser starfish. So, the idea is that she's seeing this incredible creature that sort of represents and is very much closely resembles the crawler, and she's trying to say this is what it's like. But again, like anything else she'll say in this part of the chapter, unless if you're there and experience it, oh my goodness. When I read this, especially the first and second time I read it, it's just incredible writing because it feels like you're right there staring at the crawler, going through all the crazy things that she was going to. But the longer I stared at it, the less comprehensible the creature became, the more uncanny, right? The less familiar it's becoming, and it's unsettling. The more it became something alien to me, the more I had a sense that I knew nothing at all about nature, about ecosystems. Further down on the next paragraph, when I finally wrenched my gaze from that starfish and stood again, I could not tell where the sky met the sea, whether I faced the water or the shore, and there was a glowing beacon below me. Whoa. So something opens up into the ocean. We don't know what it is. Although if you read book 2, you might find out. In the next paragraph, turning that corner, encountering the crawler for the first time was a similar experience but had 1,000 times the magnitude. If on those rocks those many years ago I could not tell sea from shore, here I could not tell stairs from ceiling, and even though I steadied myself with my arm against the wall seemed to cave in before my touch. Oh my goodness. Now that was all on page 175. And now she says that when she goes inside, no words can, no photographs could. And essentially, she's saying this is so uncanny and so incredible. You've never experienced something like this before. It so overwhelmed my ability to comprehend shapes within it that I forced myself to switch from sight to focus at first on reports from other senses. In other words, it is so incredible it can't be seen. So she closes her eyes and tries to smell it, imagine it, feel it, touch it, hear it, and so it's overwhelmed, which is an idea of control, right? And also something what we call the sublime, which is extreme uh, inertia. When you start to go kind of crazy and get a little bit of vertigo, in a way it's good and satisfying, but in another way it's scary and unsettling. You gotta like them roller coasters. I'm telling you, that's totally sublime. Okay, then, at the bottom of page 176, then it became an overwhelming hugeness in my battered vision, some seeming to rise and keep rising as it leapt toward me. Leapt toward me? Normally people walk towards you, but it leapt, it literally jumped over like that, kind of like what they do in the Matrix. The shape spread until it was even, where it was not, or should not have been. How uncanny. It seemed now more like a kind of obstacle or wall, or thick closed door blocking the stairs. Not a wall of light, gold, blue, green, existing in some other spectrum, but a wall of flesh that resembled, key word here, requoted, resembled light, with sharp, curving elements within it, and textures like ice when it has frozen from flowing water. An impression of living things lazily floating in the air around it like soft tadpoles, very similar to the dream that she had, right? She had this dream, and I mentioned it in chapter 4, after she had just killed the surveyor. But at the limits of my vision, so I could not tell if this was akin or like those floating dark motes that are those tricks of the eyes that do not exist. So now she doesn't even know what's real and unreal anymore. They're starting to merge into one. Really well thought out writing here, right? And again, she's thinking about how, in the next paragraph, how the crawler actually changes and transforms itself multiple times. Okay, she says its message, its code of change, of recalibrations and adjustments, of transformations, and perhaps another dark shadow, vaguely head-shaped above the arm, but as indistinct as if I had been swimming in murky water. So again, these are all using very uncanny terms. So, but as if, these are two great words that indicate the uncanny. Of course, transformations, codes of change, recalibrations, and adjustments. So this also deals with the idea of adaptation, right? It's very interesting that the crawler changes constantly, not because it must, but because it's trying to communicate with her, and it's trying to do so in the least alien way possible. So it keeps changing itself so as to try to give her a message. So at the bottom of page 177, the crawler changed, or was I beginning to black out and come back to consciousness or come back to reality? It would appear as if is another uncanny term, as if nothing was there, nothing at all, as if the words wrote themselves, and then the crawler would tremble into being and wink out again, coming in and coming out. And that's when she realizes that it is trying so hard to mimic everything it can with humanity to make her see what it is because she cannot see it in its true form, right? So at midway towards the bottom of page 178, it says the enormity of this experience combined with a heart-beating crescendo of sound from its ceaseless writing to fill me up, I had no room left. This moment, which I might have been waiting for my entire life all unknowing, this moment of an encounter with the most beautiful, the most terrible thing I might ever experience was beyond me. So, how uncanny. And this is another idea of the sublime. The sublime is something that is so beautiful and so amazing that it's almost scary, right? When you look out at the edge of a cliff and you look down, normally that's supposed to scare you and you jump back, right? But what happens if you stare at the immensity of it and you see how vast the valley is, you see how big a mountain is and how beautiful it is? That's what she's referring to. And again, time elapses and we don't know how long this is going on, but it feels like forever. And then on page 179, she talks about how the crawler is an organism that uses mimicry just as much as a chameleon uses its sort of different colors to blend in, right? It's trying to blend in with her reality. And so she's really having a hard time trying to understand it, right? She's having a hard time trying to read it. And by reading it, I mean trying to understand what it is as an organism, its purpose, etc., etc. Okay. And then on page 180, she says that she feels like she's drowning. Um, and this suggests that she could have been dying at that point, and that somehow all these memories were made up, although it could just be a sort of memory, right? Before you die, you sort of remember all those things that happened in your life, so they say. And then halfway, it's literally like in the middle of page 181. I love it. I love it. It's kind of right here, right? It's right there in the center. And it's one of the last words from the crawler. There shall be a fire that knows your name, and in the presence of the strangling fruit, its dark flame shall acquire every part of you. In other words, it's turning into her. And it's very interesting that in the movie, they do an excellent job of this, right? Um, that's where we kind of get the idea that this sort of crawler just mimics and takes DNA from the human. And what they do in the movie is they show the crawler taking some blood from her eye and it transforms itself into her. And then it disseminates itself into her. And it's a very interesting sort of event that happens at the end of the movie. Very similar to this. And on page 182, but I couldn't stay there, still within the range of its regard. I had no choice now. Throat raw, my insides feeling eviscerated. In other words, she feels like she's dead. I flung myself down into the greater dark below the crawler, on my hands and knees at first. In other words, she's gonna escape. Apparently, I was recognizable to the crawler now. Apparently, I was words it could understand, unlike the anthropologist. I wondered if my cells would long be able to hide their transformation from me. I wondered if this was the beginning of the end. But mostly I felt the utter relief of having passed the gauntlet, if barely. The brightness deep within was curled up, traumatized. So whatever has happened to her, I think the reason why she survives is because of those additional cells that she got from the spores early on in the novel. Perhaps my only real expertise, my only talent, is to endure beyond the endurable. So you want to write that down. if you're going to talk about adaptation, or if you want to talk about the sort of traits that are essential for a character to be successful in Area X, the ability to endure to go beyond the endurable. In other words, someone who is a survivor and can survive any sort of situation because they can adapt even in a point where it seems impossible for them to adapt. Okay. Then at the bottom of page 183, the closer I got, and with it still distant, the more I was also certain that this door bore an uncanny resemblance to the door I had seen in my glance back after having crossed the border, on our way to base camp. The very vagueness of it triggered this response, because it was a specific kind of vagueness. Oh my goodness. Is the bottom of the tower, I never realized this until right now, is the bottom of the tower, I'm getting chills on my skin, is the bottom of the tower, is that the way that they come in? Is that the way that they make it through? Oh my goodness. So that's how they got through. That's why the psychologist had to pretend like they went through an actual border. What they really did is they went straight into the gullet of a beast. And that's how they made it through. So scary. So scary. Okay. And I know this is a little bit longer than the other videos, but it's fine. And on page 184, in the first full paragraph, she says, "Finally, I came to a halt." The words continued, unrelenting, downward, and I estimated the door lay no more than 500 or 600 steps below me. We'll skip a little bit here. I wanted to continue on, but I could not continue on. So, at this point in the novel, unlike in the previous parts of this expedition, she was almost always in control of her faculties, right? Or so she believed. Then there was the question about what's really her thoughts and what is someone else's thoughts. The psychologist says how many things are really real and how much are verifiable. And now her sense of control is almost completely gone, right? I could not will my legs to do it, could not force my mind to overcome the fear and uneasiness the uncanny is starting to take over her. This sensation was residual, if not a compulsion. So she isn't supposed to be here. Was I in the end stages of some prolonged form of annihilation? So maybe she is going to die after all, because as we find out, the term annihilation is a way to make her commit suicide. And then at the top of page 185, it says, "I remember the sensation in that moment of turning away, that something was now peering out at me from the door below. But when I glanced over my shoulder, only the familiar hazy white brilliance greeted me." But as we find out, she decides to make one more step, and I will talk about that in the next video.